I think it's safe to say that if you have even the slightest interest in manga, you'll have heard of Weekly Shonen Jump. It is the most popular magazine to get all of your battle-heavy manga. While I can't say that Shonen Jump is what got me into manga in the first place, I can say that it has definitely leaked out to a wide mainstream audience. Go out on the street and ask anyone if they've heard at least of Dragon Ball, and 9 times out of 10 they will say yes, unless you know they've lived under a goddamn rock. They don't have to even like anime or manga, but that's just how much of a wide influence Shonen Jump has, and the formula of the main character fighting progressively stronger enemies has been a working one for the magazine. However, there are those rare instances where there will be a manga that will not be about power levels, multiple forms, and so forth, and The Promised Neverland was an example of a manga that broke that formula. The Promised Neverland centered around a group of children and their plan to escape their orphanage due to finding out they were actually being raised as food for demons. It had elements of horror and mystery into it, and the fights were not always won through progressively getting stronger. Currently, the manga has already concluded with 20 volumes and 2 anime seasons, with the first season doing really well, and the second season, well, they f***ed it up. Honestly, I don't even know how they let that happen, considering that the blueprint is already out and finished. It could have been great, but no, they had to make The Promised Neverland Route A. Well, despite the horrendous turn of the anime, the manga definitely was a good read thanks to the writer being Kaiyu Shirai and the illustrator being Posuka Demizu. Now initially, when Shirai brought the 300-page draft of The Promised Neverland to his editor, Suguru Sugita, they had difficulties finding an artist whose art style could match the story's dark and fantastic elements, since Shirai himself was actually going to do the story and art. However, Sugita felt that his style wouldn't be able to do the script justice. Many candidates turned down the offer because the story didn't feel shonen jump enough. As I mentioned earlier, this was a rare occasion in which the manga broke out of that traditional formula and was actually a hit. After a while, Shirai considered Posuka Demizu since her art style would be able to fit the story's imagery really well. And actually, prior to publishing The Promised Neverland, they both worked on a one-shot called Poppy's Wish that was well received by readers. So much so that the synergy they had was even compared to Tsugumi Oba and Takashi Obata. And don't worry, we're gonna get to him soon, since he is also responsible for getting a shonen manga out there that wasn't the traditional battle formula. Demizu debuted as a manga artist in 2013 with Oreka Monster Boken Ritsuden and did a few more works and one-shots before starting The Promised Neverland with Shirai. And even after the completion of The Promised Neverland, she still continued to work with him on a one-shot called Spirit Photographer Saburo Kono. She has an art book called Pone, which has a bunch of her work she has done, as well as this art book that I recently picked up that is filled with the illustrations she has done for The Promised Neverland. It was about $35, and when I find the opportunity, I really need to pick up that Pone art book. Remember, support your favorite artists. It's the reason why I always try to own an art book that they have made before doing an analysis of their artwork. I can't always do it since these are technically huge investments, since some of these books can cost a lot of money. I'm talking like over 100. But anyway, I'll look at her inked work, then I'll color the work, while I point out some interesting things that I find in her art style. At first glance, when looking at her inked work, it doesn't take long to know that she has a very unique style. It's not the typical anime style, which makes me instantly find this very appealing to me. Most people that know me would think that I prefer the semi-realistic style, however styles like this that have a lot of personality to it really sticks out for me. Off the bat, I'll say that Demizu does an amazing job with proportion and variation. No two characters in this series look alike unless they're specifically meant to. And with a series that centers on a bunch of toddlers like The Promised Neverland, it is vital to have some signature designs for them. There's this one panel where a handful of the children are being described, and it perfectly exemplifies how varied the characteristics for each character are. Eye shape, hairstyle, and the nose, it's all varied. And with that being said, I have to commend Demizu for not only being able to have group shots littered all over this manga, but to also do this at a weekly basis. And that is where I believe her draftsmanship plays to her advantage. I sort of place her in the same camp with Itadaki Paru and Fujimoto Tatsuki in that they have this sort of scratchy art style. The line economy is sort of all over the place and sometimes it can look a bit simple at times. However, that along with the exaggerated proportion, as I mentioned before, gives it a lot of personality. I mean, look at this neck. It is very anatomically wrong. However, we can look past this due to it looking more like an intentional exaggeration that complements the line work. It's these little details that make Demizu's style really come to life. And speaking of life, the line work helps with all the emotions the characters give off as well. Since The Promised Neverland is technically somewhat of a horror, suspense, thriller manga, the characters' expressions really need to sell the emotion to the readers, and oh boy does it do just that. The scene where Korone finds Emma and the look on her face still gives me chills when I reread that part. And the same goes for Emma with her look of distraught when she thought the other kids got eaten by the demons. And oh right, the demons! They actually look like demonic monstrosities. And I say this because I usually see the trope of demons looking more or less like humans, except for that one particular trait like eating people or a superpower that makes them much stronger than humans. I'm certainly looking at you, Demon Slayer. But here, they don't even look slightly like humans, and I absolutely love that. The reason being is that we get to see a huge contrast with not only how they look in comparison to the human characters, but in also how they act. We got our basic monster variety of demons that just eats whatever's in front of them, but we also get this more elegant and intelligent type. Now these guys do still look like monsters, but it's unsettling and uncanny in how they actually use utensils and eat their food with these monstrous teeth. It's this dichotomy between cute and monstrous, carnivorous and culture that Demizu absolutely nails with her art style. And one last thing that I have to mention with her inkwork is her fantastical landscapes and background designs. The Promised Neverland takes place in a multitude of environments, and Demizu draws each of them beautifully. I'm not going to go in too depth here because I'm going to bring this back up when I'm talking about her colored work, but she absolutely nails the scale and otherworldly feeling that the setting has. Even the more industrial town-like areas are drawn really well, especially Goldie Pond, which pains me that this was not included in the second season. Okay, mini rant. How amazing this would have been animated. This whole arc could have been its entire own season, but they just had to cut so much out, especially the 7 walls. They don't mention it at all in the anime, and I usually don't talk about the anime when in comparison to the actual work the artist has done, since the manga is, I believe, the original vision, so to speak. Especially considering that Demizu perfectly draws pages that exemplifies an era that technically transcends time, space, and, well, just reality. And looking at these pages, the imagery was very cerebral in a good way. But no, we got robbed. Looking at her color work, it's obvious that it's done digitally. There's no way you could get all these colors this saturated traditionally. However, Demizu does what I'd suggest most digital artists should do, and that is limit your palette. If you look at a handful of her work, you can see that she doesn't go too far away from one main color in each of her pieces. I find that she mostly has a warm earth tone color palette for most of the pieces she's done in the Promised Neverland, and in her own illustrations there will be some times where the majority of the colors that will be used in the piece will just be shades of blue, while the oranges will be very slight and desaturated, and it's always cohesive since she isn't just splattering jewel tones all over the place. However, it's not to say that you're not supposed to do that. In fact, I'm a firm believer that there are no such things as concrete rules in art to begin with. Hell, she does exactly that for this piece here. I'll just say that you'll have to find a way to make it visually work if you decide to go off the deep end with color. Another thing that I took note of is her selective use of detail. I already mentioned her scratchy art style in the previous section, but it also plays a role in her colored work too. Sort of like how you work the focus of a camera, in which the main object will be in focus while everything else will be blurred out, is sort of how she implements her detail, which makes sense because there's no need to add so much detail on the minor things in the background. And along the lines of this camera analogy, she's really good with this fish-eyed lens effect. The only person off the bat that I know that does this really well is Kim Jung-gi, but Demizu also finds a way of making this work really well for her too. It's crazy because each piece that she's worked on feels like its own world that I could jump right into. Again, it's that sense of scale she implements in her illustrations. There's always a story in most of her illustrations, and it honestly looks like concept art for a game. Which, what do you know, she has done some video game work in her artistic career. Sort of reminds me of George Kamitani's work, a guy that I will definitely get to one day. Just look at all the details, the perspective in some of these illustrations. She's not only good with drawing fantastical things, but she's also well versed in machinery and vehicles too. She's just one of those artists that seem to know how to draw damn near everything. Posuka Demizu was an artist that I got a few requests on, and to be honest, she was always someone that was much further up the list that I was always going to talk about relatively soon. Her unique style that pushes proportion and variation gives her characters so much life, as well as gives each of them a very distinct look that separates them from each other, which is vital in a manga when dealing with a large cast of characters. The demons she draws are drawn in such a monstrous way that really separates them from the humans, while making it very unsettling when you do see them sort of act like humans. Her color work is very controlled in terms of the colors she uses, but she adds that extra level of flair with her skill and perspective and selective choice in detail, and that fish-eyed lens technique is just an added bonus. Demizu has these 2 art books that you really should get if you want to see more of her work, and she has her own website, she has a Twitter, and a Pixel that you could follow if you want. The Promised Neverland is finished, so you can also get the volumes, and it'll be much better than that goddamn anime adaptation. Well, the second season to be specific. The first season is fine. Anyway, thank you for watching this episode of Artist Analysis, and I'll see you in the next one. What is good, guys? I am back at the end of the video, as always. I got this out within a week. I said I would, and I did, so here it is. Again, as I've said in the video, Posuka Demizu was always going to be an artist that I was going to look at relatively soon. And I have seen the request, so it was only a matter of time that I was going to get to her. So yeah, here she is. If you guys made it to the end of this video, thank you. Usually I check my analytics and I know that the viewers' retention sort of goes down towards the end. So if you guys do make it to this point, again, thank you. I feel like I've definitely outdone myself with the editing on this song. I've been getting in a groove on how I want things to be edited, and it makes me go back to my old artist analysis, and it just makes me cringe on how not up to snuff it is with my current analysis. And I think this is my 12th one, I don't know, but back then I was using Camtasia, and well, currently I'm using Premiere Pro, and I feel like Premiere Pro has much more tools for me to use in terms of editing. So I've always had on the back of my mind that sometime in the future I'll redo my first 10 artist analysis, like in the far future, when I guess I'm relatively bigger and when I've had more experience doing this, because I'm still trying to iron out the nooks and crannies and so forth in my video making process and so forth. So yeah, anyway, I hope you guys liked this episode, and I hope you guys stick around for my other art related videos. If you want, you can like. If you want, you can comment, and I'd very appreciate it if you would subscribe if you want to see more videos like this and other art, anime, manga videos. Well, anime, manga isn't really directly part of my channel's content, but it's a derivative thing that I can always touch upon. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.